And welcome to Hannity. It's time for the world to wake up. In just the past 4 months, we have seen a sharp spike in the number of radical Islamic terror attacks around the world, including right here on American soil. Watch this.
Sounds like he's running around out here.
Okay.
And that's a gunshot.
Tonight, terror in the heartland. The FBI is investigating a brutal beheading in Moore, Oklahoma, after the suspect's co-workers revealed that he had been trying to convert them to Islam.
He did kill Colleen and did sever her head.
Canada now, where there has been a shooting at Parliament Hill, which is now in complete lockdown. The suspect is still on the loose. This is an active shooting situation.
A man with apparent sympathies toward anti-American rhetoric is dead tonight after attacking a group of New York City police officers with a hatchet.
Preliminary evaluation is that this was a terrorist act.
Sydney, Australia, hostages seen on camera running for their lives.
5 people escaping from a gunman who some 15 hours ago stormed into a cafe in downtown Sydney waving a jihadi flag.
Underway right now in Paris for the masked gunmen, 3 of them, who stormed a French newspaper, killing at least 12 people at the offices of Charlie Hebdo.
This vicious terrorist attack is a reminder that we must always be vigilant against the enemies of freedom.
Now, the rise of radical Islam around the globe is disturbing, so tonight we have brought together right here in studio terrorism experts, former members and law enforcement officials, and much more to talk about this grave threat. Thank you all for being with us. Appreciate it. Robert Spencer, Jihad Watch. Seems that we have this rise, but there is one commonality in each instance, the word Islam. But yet the president won't say Islamic State. What happened at Fort Hood, Allahu Akbar, is workplace violence. Why this reluctance and resistance to say the word Islam and associate it with terror?
It seems as if the president thinks and the administration thinks that if they say something is Islamic, then they will be at war with the entire Islamic world, and right-wing racist vigilantes will go and victimize innocent people in the United States. Both are hogwash and nonsense. And what's happened is that we have effectively gotten ourselves into a position where it's forbidden to speak about the motives and goals of the enemy, and you cannot possibly defeat an enemy that you refuse to understand.
I had Anjem Chowdhury on, the radical imam. What did he say? I said, well, is Islam a peaceful religion? He said, no, it's not. It's about submission. Is that the interpretation? And how many people are we talking about?
Well, the word Islam itself means submission. It does not mean peace. It's related to peace, but it means submission. And it not only means submission to God, it means submission of the non-Muslims to the Muslims. It is a political system that mandates that the non-Muslims have to live in a state of subordination under the rule of Islam and are denied basic rights.
That is exactly what the imam said to me this week. Very open and honest, and I wanted people to hear that. I came under some fire for putting him on and giving him airtime. Bill Donahue, you're with the Catholic League. We keep hearing, well, they're extremists in every religion. You dealt with the issue of the Virgin Mary painting with elephant dung and a crucifix submerged in urine. Did any Christians go out there and kill because of those expressions?
No, that's because we exercise the virtue of restraint, which obviously is not widespread in the Muslim community. And it's not just the radical Muslims. It may be only a few that are violent, but quite frankly, the support for blasphemy laws in Sharia extends way beyond just these barbarians that we're talking about.
Yeah. Lieutenant General McInerney, let me ask you, do you think militarily the United States is handling this properly? Are we taking Islam, radical Islam, seriously enough that we'll defeat it? Or are we appeasing it? Did the French appease the Muslims that moved by giving them their no-go zones, their own private neighborhood and territory? Was that the right decision?
Well, I would say we are not even appeasing it right now. Right now, we are losing. We haven't lost, but we are losing, and that's because our military leaders do not know the enemy. As Sun Tzu says, know thy threat. Well, you're going to hear senior military leaders in active duty now, they talk about radical extremists. Sean, tell me, what is the ideology of a radical extremist? I'll tell you what the ideology of a radical Islamist is. It's the Quran, it's Sharia, and it's the Hadith. That's where they get their rules of engagement and their ideology. And so if we don't identify the radicals for what they are and where it came from, we cannot defeat it. And the military today is not identifying it.
Let's talk about Brigitte. You lived in Pakistan, right?
I lived in Lebanon.
Lebanon, okay. And you understand, you studied the Quran. Let's take the literal interpretation of the Quran. Infidels, jihad, the things that are in there. If taken literally, does that lead to what Robert Spencer is talking about?
Yes, that's exactly what they lead to, jihad against the infidels. We have a saying in Arabic, أولاً يأتي السبت وبعده الأحد. First comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. First we kill the Jews, then we come for the Christians. In the Middle East, the Islamic Middle East, there is no tolerance to any other faith or group of people. We minorities in the Middle East have been massacred, killed. My house was bombed. This is how I ended up in this country, as a refugee from the Middle East. It was happening when my parents were refugees, when I was a child, newborn, and here I am in America today, and my people are still fleeing because of the intolerance of Islamic extremism. So my past is America's future unless America wakes up now and takes the necessary steps.
What are the necessary steps?
Identify the enemy by name in order for you to devise a strategy to defeat it. Right now, we have a president at the White House who doesn't have the moral clarity and the courage to stand up and say what we are fighting. And we need to do that in order for us to defeat this enemy. It is Islamic terrorism. It's not Buddhist terrorism. It's not Jewish terrorism. It's not Catholic terrorism.
How many numbers are we talking about? The world has 1.6 billion Muslims. How many Muslims are we talking about?
We're talking about 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. 15 to 25% are radicalized.
You're talking about 400 million, maybe?
We're talking about 300 million people who are ready to strap bombs on their bodies and blow us all up to smithereen.
And what about the others? Problem. Are they in a silent agreement, or are they afraid that they will be deemed apostates and apostatism under Islam is death?
The majority agree with the radicals. The Pew Research did a study back in 2013, just almost a year ago, where they interviewed Muslims from around the world, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Nairobi, Pakistan, all over the Islamic world, Egypt. And what they found out is the top 5 Islamic countries, Indonesia, Nairobi, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Egypt, the average 77% support the establishment of Sharia law as the law of the state and the establishment of an Islamic caliphate.
All right, so now we've got 44 million, Benjamin, Muslims in Europe, 44 million. That's expected to grow to 58 million in the next 15 years. Now, we see how France has a problem, Belgium has a problem, all throughout Europe, Great Britain has a problem. They set up no-go zones, non-Muslims not allowed, separate Sharia courts, police can't even go in if there's an issue, or firemen can't go in. So now the question is, okay, if you're a Western country and Sharia is contradictory to all of those values, so Muslims are moving in, how do you determine which Muslims want freedom and which maybe perhaps want to come in and implement Sharia law? How do these Western countries decide who gets in and who doesn't get in?
Well, so I think that there's a social contract that has to exist, right, between the immigrant and the country that they're coming to. I think we certainly believe that here in the U.S. I think one of the issues that we've now seen the consequence of in France, as you said, France is the largest Muslim population in Europe, 6.5 million. You know, that's 10% of their population. That has led to them becoming a very large active constituency, right? So President Hollande won 93% of that vote. Of that 6.5 million. That's a very important voting bloc. So they now have gone from these very disparate kind of organizations.
They have voting power.
They have voting power, which means that they have massive amounts of influence, which means how much.
Interesting. So they go to France. They don't assimilate. They take portions of the country unto themselves and say, "Don't come into our part."
Yes, sir.
See, Pam, you are very outspoken in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the Muslim Brotherhood. It sounds to me like France has almost set itself up where, like Israel, they will be surrounded very closely by neighbors that want to destroy them. Is this the beginning of something to come?
Well, perhaps they should meet with the French Muslims and set up two states so they can live side by side peacefully. That's a joke.
I could tell.
But look.
But it's not a joke because they are living separately.
No, they are living separately. Police can't go in there. They are ambushed. It's like almost, hundreds of years ago where there were city-states set up. I don't worry so much about the piety and the devoutness of the enemy. I worry about the confusion and the obfuscation on our side. The New York Times actually scrubbed the news story where one of the jihadists told the journalist that lived that she had to convert, she had to study the Quran, and she had to wear the veil.
Yeah.
They took that, they removed that from the story.
The editor took it out of the story. This is very important. We're going to talk about the media later.
Yeah, well, the media.
We'll get to know on this. I know he's our media expert. They took it out of the story.
It's obfuscation. It's deliberate. It's the enemy media. I mean, they're literally deceiving and disarming freedom-loving peoples. Ismail Brinsley, who slaughtered the New York Police Department, his Facebook page, Strike Terror in the Hearts of the Infidel, the beheader, Yisrael, who beheaded Colleen Hufford, who you started out with, his Facebook page was all Islam. That was not in the paper.
How many agree with what Pam's saying? So the world. So let me ask the question another way, maybe more bluntly: is the world cowering to Islam? Yes. Hands up. Yes. Everybody agrees. Anyone disagree? Anybody disagree? Wow, pretty interesting. All right, we got to take a break. We're going to come back, and coming up next on this busy news night tonight here on Hannity. Welcome back to the special audience edition of Hannity, The Rise of Radical Islam. Now, last week, the radical London Imam, Anjem Chowdhury, was a guest on this program. He gave his definition of what Islam is. Take a close listen.
Islam does not mean peace, it means submission. Submission to the commands of God.
Okay, so you want the worldwide submission.
With me, then we can live peacefully together.
Now, unlike Chowdhury, many Muslims describe theirs as a religion of peace, but some verses from the Quran tell a very different story. Let's take a look at the Quran. Quote, "So when you meet those who disbelieve in battle, strike their necks until you have inflicted slaughter upon them." Here's another. "But those who disbelieve will have cut out for them garments on fire. Pour upon their heads will be scalding water, which is melted that within their bellies and their skins." And here's what the Quran says about other religions. The Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, and the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. Well, that is their statement from their mouths, and it goes on to read, "May Allah destroy them. How are they deluded?" But there are moderate voices in Islam. For example, here is Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi speaking to imams and religious scholars. Listen closely to what he said this past Christmas.
بتوقف كثيرا قدام الحالة اللي احنا موجودين فيها. مش معقول يكون الفكر اللي احنا بنقدسه ده يدفع بالأمة دي بالكامل إن هي تبقى مصدر للقلق وللخطر والقتل والتدمير في الدنيا كلها. يعني 1.6 مليار هيقتلوا الدنيا كلها اللي فيها 7 مليار عشان يعيشوا هم؟ مش ممكن. أنا بقول تاني احنا محتاجين ثورة دينية.
We bring back our studio audience. Robert, that's where we started. The Quran. Brigitte, that's where we started. So is that how you're saying 300 million Muslims interpret the Quran that literally?
Estimated 300 million Muslims out of the 1.2 billion who follow the teachings of the Quran and believe it literally to the word, and they want to follow it.
How many people agree that that is the interpretation of as many as 300 million or more?
It's many more than that. It's many more than that.
I've had 500 million. I thought it was 1.6 billion.
Well, 300 million may be willing to actually go out and kill. But the literalism is the mainstream understanding of the Quran in Islam. There is no developed tradition of interpreting these things in some figurative way. When the Quran says fight against the people of the book, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya, a tax, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued, that is taught as a mandate for warfare by the vast majority, by virtually all Islamic authorities. It's mainstream. The Muslims who are not fighting still understand that that is something that is good and proper to be done, and they applaud those who do it.
General, I understand the military knows this, but I only think it's beginning to dawn on people. Everyone here in this room has read the Quran, or at least portions of it. And what? Yeah, and I would assume the military knows full well what's in there. But do you think the average American does?
Well, first of all, the average American doesn't, but the average military man doesn't either. They have restricted the study of radical Islam. They don't even use that term. Anything in their curriculum that talks about radical Islam has been eradicated with this administration. And that is our main problem. And in our leadership, look, the captains, the majors, the sergeants understand that the Iraqis, et cetera, did not want our Jeffersonian democracy. They wanted our money.
Mm-hmm.
But
President Obama scrubbed all of the materials that General McInerney is talking about. Robert Spencer used to talk to Intel. They're not getting any education whatsoever. What General Sisi said was calling for a revolution it's calling for a revolution in Islam. That you
he may die for those comments.
Saying
you've got to change.
Your President Obama did not
Not
back
my president.
He backed the Muslim Brotherhood. He backed the opposition to this man that's speaking frankly and candidly about Islam.
Well, Sean, this brings a bigger issue. Is the issue Islam as a whole for failing to police itself? We need to look at that as a country.
David.
There's a very important point to come off what Carl just said. We can fight this problem. We can kill terrorists, and we should kill as many as possible at every opportunity. But it's up to the Muslims around the world to police and solve their problem. And frankly, this will be a violent solution. Muslims will have to kill Muslims by the tens of thousands, by the millions to solve this issue.
No.
Yeah, I think what the general was talking about is really a failure of our understanding geopolitically. In 2001, it was unfathomable that you could see the establishment of a caliphate across North Africa and into the Middle East. Today, it is a reality. We're looking at a real war, not an counterinsurgency operation like we saw in the last decade.
Let me go to, hang on, Leah, Andy, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that I actually went with Robert to Fort Leavenworth at one point, and the same academic resistance that you see towards understanding and teaching the jihad ideology that you would see in the Ivy League at a Harvard, for example, where you would understand it because it's a hard left institution. That is in the military institutions as well.
Leah, you were fighter pilot?
I'm just going to have to correct the record here about the military and the intelligence community because I served in both. And to say that there's not an understanding of violent extremism and terrorism in those communities is absolutely
wrong. It's jihad. It's not violent extremism. It's jihad. Okay, it's rooted in Islam. It is how the Muslim empire was created. It's how it's how
we can play tit for tat here, but to say that the intelligence community does not understand it and is not focused on it is absolutely wrong. If you listen to the testimony, of the director of the National Counterterrorism Center and the director of the FBI, these are things that they are looking at, they're watching, and it's things that the intelligence community have been watching for. The counterinsurgency manual is completely separate from the intelligence community. I'm sorry,
all right, we're gonna have to. This was such a peaceful show.
Muslim organizations wrote to John Brennan on October 19th, 2011, demanding that all mention of Islam be removed.
We got to take a break. We'll come back in just a moment. More Hannity straight ahead.